Thanks for tuning in to our bonus episode preview. This is just a short sample of this week's exclusive Patreon episode. You can hear the episode in its entirety by becoming a member at patreon.com/IndoctriNation, where you'll gain access to all of our exclusive episodes and merchandise. Hello to our wonderful Patreon supporters. This is a bonus episode for you, and this is a special bonus episode. It is a conversation that I'm having with Andrew Pledger, our wonderful social media manager extraordinaire. He has been on the podcast before, so you're probably familiar with him and his story. But I think this topic is very timely, and it's something that was brought to my attention by Andrew. So I invited him on to be able to talk about his reflections about the movie Wicked. I know some people have seen the movie, other people have seen the show. I was able to see both, which was lovely, and see how they're a bit similar and different, but the themes are the same. And we're going to be pinpointing the themes. And there is this overlay of this other theme, which is that sometimes you can be watching something or listening to something and hearing it through your way of sifting through that information based on your feelings or your experiences. And you can also be seeing it through a certain lens of your experience or your sensitivities or your past. And I had a lot of reactions while watching the movie and watching the show that, Andrew, I know you kind of felt as well, but there was this whole other kind of world to it for you, where you brought some things to my attention about what you saw and what you felt and how you saw yourself in this story on so many levels. And so I would love for our audience and our supporters to be able to hear you share your reflections. And I'd also be curious to hear from people listening to this to see if they had similar reactions or different reactions based on their experiences or the experiences of their loved ones, etc. So, Andrew, if you don't mind just taking a moment to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive right into your great points.
My name is Andrew Pledger, and I grew up gay in the independent fundamental Baptist movement, and ended up at Bob Jones University, and then left that environment and made a podcast about them, exposing it. And so, yeah, a lot of my work has been a lot of podcasting and online activism, bringing awareness to cults and religious trauma, and helping other survivors tell their stories. And also, like, through that work, I've been really processing my own story and my own trauma kind of out loud, which is kind of interesting, and that's something I've been backing away a little bit from on my social media for a little bit. But I love to let people know that they're not alone, and I think that's why I really do it, because I was that person that felt so alone, and I don't want anyone else to feel that way. But yeah, thank you for having me on.
Of course. I think that there are so many times that we've had the experience of sitting next to someone while we're watching a movie or listening to a lecture or whatever it is that we're doing. And, one of us could be laughing, the other one isn't. Or one of us is laughing, the other one's crying. And you're thinking, wow, there's something different happening here, probably because of something different that's happened before leading up to that moment. And something that really left a mark, and something also that touched you in a way that didn't necessarily touch a person with a certain amount of sensitivity. Still, you might not have that multi-layered sensitivity if it hasn't been your experience. So, but I do think a lot of the people who are our audience are going to be able to relate to many of the points that you're making today. So I think it's going to be really resonant for them. So go for it. Get started. Start with your points, and I'll jump in.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start probably with how it relates to me personally, and then because I saw it from my own personal experiences, but also just through the information I've learned through your podcast and even just books that I've read. So having the experiences, but also that cult education lens on together, I think really helps me a lot, and really realizing the trauma. And so something that stood out to me, which was a phrase I said on the last episode for last year, was, in cultic groups and high control groups, difference is dangerous.
Mm.
And that is a common theme that I really saw throughout Wicked. And I really, really related to Elphaba, the Wicked Witch in the movie, because growing up, she was unseen, unheard, very much misunderstood, very different. And she was treated as if something was wrong with her. And there was this standard that she needed to conform to. And so that was something that resonated with me so deeply, because that's how I felt, growing up being gay, obviously not realizing that for a long time, not being able to conform to expected gender roles, and even um, teachings around how males are supposed to act or behave, or even just feel and think growing up. So there was this struggle of, oh, I have to change myself to be loved and accepted. And there's a lot of trauma that comes with that, of knowing I have to be somebody else to be loved. And even on top of that, oh, I have to conform to these things because these are signs of my salvation and I'm going to go to hell. So that's a whole other aspect of that too. So it was being different and trying to conform, and then being demonized for being different. And that was something that Elphaba, or I don't know if I'm saying it right, Alphaba or Elphaba, I would say the Wicked Witch from now on.
Mhm.
The Wicked Witch in the movie, and it shows a different perspective, because we always saw the witch as wicked, as really bad, from the original Wizard of Oz movie. But this shows the backstory to this character, of her childhood and growing up, and seeing a different lens through which she behaves, of things that audience is not aware of. And then, throughout this movie, Glinda, the witch, the good witch, tries to, like, and I'm saying in air quotes for people listening, help her conform and be, and I say in air quotes, normal. And I think a lot of people who felt different, or who are in a marginalized community, can relate so much to this, whether you're neurodivergent, in the queer community, a person of color, of what it's like to be in a system where you're forced to conform and there are consequences for not conforming. And so, she's going through this environment, and people are mistreating her, and she reacts in ways that I think a normal person would react, and she's demonized for that. And I think I saw that, how different marginalized groups are mistreated. And it's kind of like the narcissist, how they like stir someone and they get them to have a reaction, and they're like, oh, look how awful they are. See, I told you. I told you they're bad. They're not good. But throughout the movie, she tries to conform, and it's taking away her authenticity, her identity. And you can tell that it's like eating her away, but people are accepting her. But of course, they're not really, only if she's playing this role. And so eventually she gets to this point where she's like, no, I basically, I want to be myself. I don't care if you see conformity as good. I'm going to be myself. And the Wizard of Oz sees this potential in her. She has these special powers. And so that was something that she was craving, for someone to see potential in her so much. And so that was something I really related to so much too. And so she was like, oh, like someone sees me, hears me, or understands me, which can also, like, that can make you vulnerable to dangerous people too, so much. when you've been deprived of that and someone sees you, or you think they see you and hear you, or they supposedly, whatever, see your potential, that can make you very, very vulnerable. And so the wizard sees her, and like as the thing has been going on, there's been kind of this campaign against the animals of the land to get rid of them. And it's for the good of Oz and everyone. But Elphaba is like, no, this doesn't feel right to me. And as a cult survivor, for me, I felt like waking up to things in the environment and like being like, everyone else is going along, but you're like, no, this doesn't feel right to me. And then that fighting of, do I be myself? Do I conform? And just dealing with this, just the splitting of your own personality, of switching between these different things. And so with her, she unknowingly uses her magic without knowing what the wizard is making her do. And she sees that the monkeys are now starting to have wings because, basically just wants to use them for labor or for the wizard's will, whatever he wants to do with them to gain. He wants power. Power is what he wants. And he's using her to get power. But then she realizes, oh my gosh, this is what he's doing. And she originally is going to the wizard to tell him about the issues with, the campaign against the animals. But then she realizes he's the source of that. And so then her eyes are awakened to the truth, and she can no longer go back to what she was before, when she could never, once she saw the light, like she couldn't go back to the darkness, I guess. And she realized that. And then she's like, no, I'm not conforming. I'm not going along. I'm talking about this. I'm going to fight against this. So then now this leader, uses this class or these people and the animals in the movie as an excuse to get what he wanted. And she's like, no, I'm speaking out against that. And then he set out a campaign against her to portray her as wicked and evil. And he was doing what was best. So again, anyone who went against the system was bad and evil, and you cannot trust them. And that was something I related to personally for me when I spoke out. And I think that was a hard thing to realize, that when I spoke out, when I decided to speak out, I'm like, I'm going to be seen as the evil one. That was something I knew, and that I was willing to, I just had to be okay with. And that made me really emotional in the movie. But yeah, when that happened, because just the pain that comes along. But yeah, I think the movie is so, so important now, because I think before I saw the movie, I saw a glimpse of someone's post on social media that said that like it could also be seen as like the growth of fascism. And I think that kind of primed me to put on my like cult education cap and really like try to notice things throughout it. And it just perfectly, the movie explains that we can dig into the points of the process of thought reform or indoctrination that happens, that gets people to be okay with just dispensing an entire class of people, or being okay with getting rid of a certain group of people, which has happened so much throughout history through so many different groups. And it seems to be a part of history that we keep repeating. And unfortunately, and it's been something that's been on my mind, especially since Trump won. It's like, why does this keep happening? Like, how can we stop this from happening? And for me, like, I believe that cult education is such a big part of that, which I'm so grateful for this podcast and all the work that like you do to educate and help other survivors.